I have accepted an urgent question under Standing Order 12.66, and I call on William Graham to ask that question. William Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Will the Minister for Public Service make a statement on initiative to tackle the alarming rate of deliberate grass fires?
Llywydd, those who start grass fires deliberately are committing a criminal offence. I welcome the strong statement from South Wales Police yesterday. I commend the hard work of firefighters in Wales in tackling these appalling fires. We will support the fire service and the police to protect our communities.
I'm most grateful to the Minister for his answer. He will know that I've raised this and other members in the Chamber on many occasions. I pay tribute to him and his predecessors who have done their very best to reduce the alarming rate of these grass fires. We know that these fires are both wicked and senseless. They potentially put communities at risk, but it does show, as the Minister has illustrated, the dedication and professionalism of our fire and rescue services. It also puts the emergency call centres under enormous and unnecessary pressure. At this time of the year, a whole generation of ground nesting birds and young animals are lost in the affected areas. May I ask the Minister to assure me that when ministerial contracts resume, that there will be proper representation made to the judicial committees, that when they come to review sentencing guidelines, that this becomes a meaningful deterrent to an arson of this kind, and that a custodial sentence will result?
Well, can I thank William Graham for the tone in which he's asked his supplementary question. And let me say that I have myself spoken to the chief officers of all the fire and rescue authorities today to thank them for the work that is being done and to get their views on the situation at the present time, as well as representatives of the police. It is the case, of course, that, as the Deputy Chief Constable of South Wales said this morning on Good Morning Wales, that custodial sentences are available where deliberate acts of arson have been set. Certainly, I think that we will want to review these issues again. I think at the present time, our responsibility as a government is to support the fire and rescue service and the police in the actions that they are taking. And I know that there is considerable community support for the actions of the fire service and the police at the present time.
Christine Chapman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to add my comments to those already made, paying tribute to the hard work of the South Wales Fire and Rescue Services. These fires have a devastating impact on our communities, and last weekend I saw firsthand the terrible scale of the fire in my own area between Abercyn and Kilfynydd, and I know that others will have similar stories to tell from their area, from their constituencies. Now, we know this is not a new problem. Along with other Assembly members, I've been highlighting the issues for a number of years. Certainly, the problem has gone back generations, so it's not a new thing. But deliberately set grass fires seem to be getting more common. Incidents are up 892% on April last year. And in comments that appeared today, the head of South Wales Fire and Rescue's Community and Safety Partnership said the spate of fires were linked to cultural issues and poverty. Minister, what work does your department intend to do to delve beneath the surface to better understand why these fires are set, and how do you intend working with schools and community groups to promote the dangers inherent in this reckless behaviour? I'm not confident, Minister, that we won't be facing the same problem next year. So what specific lessons can we learn so that the scale of the problem diminishes in future years?
Well, my colleague, the member for Cynon Valley, is absolutely right to signal the way in which these fires have occurred over many years, but in her community, in my own communities in the Rhondda, and in other communities in South Wales. I have asked my officials to consider the available research on why perpetrators undertake these crimes, and that's something we will be considering and discussing with the fire and rescue authorities and with the police. While there has been a significant increase in grass fires this April, we know that, of course, warm, dry weather and the coincidence of school holidays do contribute to the spike in issues. We know also that the fire and rescue services have arson reduction programs in place, which include specific programs aimed at young people on the cusp of offending. This week, the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service will be visiting schools in a number of communities, including within Rhondda and Taff, with hard-hitting messages about starting deliberate fires. And they have programs, fire safety programs, of course, already in place for schools and youth services.
Lindsay Whittle.
Well, Minister, you may be aware that Becky Newton, the Plaid Cymru candidate in Caerphilly, is a firefighter, and she tells me that crews are returning to their stations absolutely exhausted. Minister, is there a way of looking to employ temporary rangers or observers, or even to assist local volunteers to patrol vulnerable parts of land during these times when grass fires are most likely? I understand the cost so far in South Wales alone is £800,000, and that is money that could be better spent by trying to prevent these fires, and perhaps we could work with landowners as well. And do you agree with me that more threats to close fire stations in the areas concerned are not helping?
Llywydd, I think it's right to say that the average number of call-outs for South Wales Fire and Rescue is somewhere around 50 a day at the present time. And there is no doubt that our firefighters are under considerable pressure, and indeed, let me say, are in some circumstances, and I've had this said to me today by the Chief Officer of Mid and West Wales Fire Service, which of course covers Swansea and East Talbot, are being diverted from house fires as a result of the challenges that they are facing. We are very clear that we will give the fire service whatever support is necessary to them, for them. I am delighted that members of the community have themselves come forward to offer their support to the fire service, and I've discussed that today with the Chief Fire Officer of South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority, and we are looking into what can be done to support those members of the community on an organised basis in making their time available to support fire and rescue authorities.
Eleanor Parrott.
Diolch Llywydd. I would too like to put on record my thanks to the members of the Fire and Rescue Service and of course the police who have been responding to these dreadful incidents, and you'll be aware of course as member for the Rhondda of the devastating impact it's had in both the Rhondda and the Cynon valleys in my region. Two brief points. The first is what do you think the impact of the decision last year to close stations such as Porth, which is of course in the heart of one of these areas worst affected, will have in terms of response times now and in the future? And the second issue is about education. There was an award-winning project called Project Bernie back in 2011, which was working between Cardiff University and the South Wales Fire and Rescue Services to try and encourage behavioural change, and it did have a noticeable impact in the areas where it was running. Is that project still going, and what can we do to be trying to change behaviour in a more consistent fashion so that we can avoid this in the future?
Well, the specific project the member refers to, Project Bernie, led to the incidence of grass fires falling by almost 80% in the 5 target areas between 2010 and 2014. We also know that reoffending rates from participants in the Fire Services Phoenix programme, which aims to divert young people from offending behaviour, are typically below 5%. These and other schemes, of course, are funded by the Welsh Government and delivered by the Fire and Rescue Service in conjunction with other partners. In respect of the issue of fire station closures, scheduled station closures are having no impact, of course, on the response times to the present series of incidents, and I suggest that we focus on the immediate issue, which is the need to support the Fire and Rescue Services and the police.
Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Minister, thank you for the answers you've given so far, and in particular highlighting in that last response where there are certain examples we can use that can reduce the incidence of these outbreaks and educate young people of the dangers. And I too join the sentiments that have been expressed by other members, showing our appreciation for the fire service and all the other professionals who are having to deal with these fires. Even in the Vale of Glamorgan, we've had these fires for the first time for many years. I was just wondering whether your officials will be examining along with the police and the fire authorities, the use of social media when these fires break out. Very often there is very much one-upmanship, and I think there's evidence of that in social media by showing the effects of these fires. And when other criminal acts are undertaken, because these are criminal acts, it's arson and vandalism are undertaken, if certain acts do happen on social media that encourage repetition or repeat of such actions, then the police do use their powers to obviously use the force of law against those people who are trying to promote it via social media. So I'd be wondering whether the Minister has any thoughts on that and whether his officials will be undertaking discussions with the social media operators.
Well, we've had discussions with the Deputy Chief Constable of South Wales Police in respect of social media. It is obviously important that intelligence is gathered not only directly from members of the community but also on social media, and the member is right to draw attention to that. Can I also commend the use of social media by the Fire and Rescue authorities, particularly South Wales Fire and Rescue and the South Wales Police, in sending out messages to the wider community on how their services are addressing the challenges that they're facing. I think that has become an important development in the communications armoury that is open to the fire service, so that members of the community know precisely what is being done on their behalf.
Alan Davis.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Minister, I'm very gratified by the statements you've made this afternoon. I know you share the horror of all of us who saw the events over the last few days, and in your constituency and in my constituency in Blaenau Gwent, there was people who were frightened in their homes and also horrified by what they were seeing on the mountains above their constituencies. I'm very glad that you've taken the time urgently to speak to both the fire authorities and also to the police. I hope you will pass on the gratitude of all of our communities to the fire authorities for the work that firefighters have been doing over the last few days, and very much support your calls to apprehend and to punish the people who are responsible for creating these fires in the first place. In your conversations with the fire authorities, Minister, can you ensure that the firefighters who have been on duty for hours and hours and days are relieved, and that we do have sufficient resources to provide exactly the sort of cover that you've already described in your statement this afternoon, to ensure that our communities are kept safe, and also that the firefighters are given the opportunity to recover from the experience of having to fight these needless fires?
Well, my colleague, the member for Blaenau Gwent, is absolutely right that we need to ensure that there is proper support for the firefighters, and I made it clear to the chief fire officers that this government will give that support to them. He's also right, I think, to talk about the reaction from the community. Members of the communities affected are rightly angry and want action taken, but many have also come forward to volunteer their support for the fire service at a community level. And we also, as a Welsh Government, have an important role to play. The First Minister and I will therefore be holding a summit next week with the Fire and Rescue Services, with the police, with Natural Resources Wales and with others to formulate a clear and coordinated programme of action for the short, medium and long term.
Jeff Cuthbert.
Minister, one of the biggest and worst grass fires has been burning at Machen Mountain in my constituency. As of the early hours of this morning, we're still alight. I endorse all the comments made by other members in this chamber today, and would certainly add my thanks to the firefighters that are making strenuous efforts to try and control matters. And in the case of my constituency, the damage to communities, to wildlife and the vegetation must be enormous. Do you agree with me, Minister, that it's very important that people who feel that they may have information to pass to the police, including if it implicates their own family members, must do so even on an anonymous basis?
Yes, I very much agree with my colleague, the member for Caerphilly. I think that we've seen public concern, for example, in his own community. There were 170 specific 999 calls about a single fire in his own constituency. So I think members of the public are very actively engaged in defending their own communities. I am also encouraged by the groups that have grown up on Facebook and on other social media, where members of the community are expressing their support for the fire service and their willingness themselves to get involved, and their demand that information, where it is available, is given to the police so that perpetrators can be apprehended.
Thank you, Minister.